Kenjan, let me start by thanking Kenjan for receiving us here today at Kiambere. We have come down from the cascade up from Masinga to basically where we have all, Kamburu, sorry, where we have all seen the investment in generation that supports this country in the hydro. As we are all aware, for the last 5 years, we have had serious failure in the rains, and you will appreciate when you see the water levels that we have a challenge. So we're here today to basically appreciate the management of the hydrology and what we have to do to basically make sure that the water levels are able to support us through the period before we get our long rains. Um, to a very good extent, I think Kengen is doing a good job in managing the hydrology to ensure that we don't dispatch when other generation systems are available so that we can preserve water for the longest time before we get the long rains. So we want to thank you, Kengen, for the good job you are doing. But the truth of the matter, like you have all seen, is that the water levels are very low. We have to basically think about the security, energy security for this country. Those guys who came before us, if you think about the planning that went into this in the 70s, in the 60s, 70s, to deliver the generation in the 80s, was a really good planning. So even as we sit here today and are concerned about tomorrow, we really need to plan for the 2030s, 2040, and 2050. With the climate change, you basically realize that unless we work on the reforestation of our catchments, unless we work on the what do you call it, climate change issues, so that we can go back to the old days when we used to have good hydrology. Generation by hydro may not really present a future for us, but certainly you are aware of the 15 billion program, which is personally run by the president to ensure that we grow some 15 billion trees in 10 years is a good initiative that will preserve these investments for the years to come. It is also worth noting that Kenya, I've just come back from Energy Week in India, and Kenya is referenced as one of the leading countries in terms of use of renewable energy. And so it falls upon us as leaders in this country to ensure that we sustain our hydros through the various programs that will support climate change. Continue to work on reducing the generation by fuels, which is part of the climate change problem. Part of the hydrology challenge we are seeing here is because of what we have done on the fossil fuel in the years past. So I want us to appreciate that even as we face this challenge, we are here to pay attention to ensure that we are able to sustain our economy despite the hydrology. The challenge is not only in power generation. We do appreciate the food security currently facing our country because of the same challenge of the failure of rains in the last 5 years. So even as we sit here, you must all be aware that Kenya is fairly diverse. As we speak today, we dispatch 800 megawatts from hydro, combining this cascade down to Sondo Miriu and Chakwel. But significantly, we have divested and we are doing significantly well in geothermal today. So when we face this kind of challenge, unlike other countries like down south Zambia, Malawi, and even South Africa, we are able to really fall back to geothermal at times like this to support the economy and the power requirements for this country. So I want to again thank. Let's manage the hydrology. Let us dispatch the hydro when we must, and continue to ramp up the geothermal rather, the solar, which is basically come up fairly well lately with Garissa, Selenge, Sadet in the North Rift. Let us push the wind generation. We've got good winds in Lengalani, which is supporting us quite a bit. But lately, because of the power trade and the interconnection with Ethiopia, areas where we've done significant investment, we're just going to be commissioning shortly the East Africa the Eastern Power link to Ethiopia, which is currently dispatching up to 200 megawatts from Ethiopia. And that way, at times like this, we are able to draw up to 200 megawatts from Ethiopia. And in other times, if they have hydrology problems, we should also be able to feed them with our power from Kenya. We're working to finalize the power pool to Tanzania and to Uganda so that the challenges of the least cost power development, where the concern of if you develop too much power, who pays for it? We should be able to sell it across the boundaries of this country and therefore mitigate the challenges that is currently facing the country or facing the other countries down south like Zambia, Malawi, and South Africa. Time in the field, looking at what's happening down in the North Rift. Even as the dams are low here, Takwel is slightly much higher today as we speak. But that's a different challenge because we've got some constraints in the transmission lines. But it is a blessing in disguise that whereas we are very low here, Takwel is slightly much higher because we had a constrained transmission line between Kitale, Otum, and Takwel, which we are fixing now, and we should be able to ramp up the generation from Takwel Hydro. I want to thank you for coming to witness this with us. You do realize that this country has made significant investment, and it is upon us to manage those investments, but more importantly, work and plan for the future. Thank you very much. Basically, the water levels are, it is energy storage. Water is a form of potential energy. It sits there, and when you push it downstream, those 20, 30, 40 meters, it runs the turbines. So when you don't have enough water, what basically that means is we'll not be able to generate. What we might be doing in a short while might be, if it gets worse, we'll be closing Masinga, which is a 40 megawatt generation. But Masinga is used as a reservoir to hold water for the downstream generation. So if we have to close Masinga, I guess what the engineers will do is to push all the water down to the cascades to support the generation downstream. We hope we don't have to get there because today is February 10th. If by March 10th we have some rains, maybe 15th, we'll be looking very keenly to receive the African weather outlook in the next 15 days. And we do expect that we should be getting some rains. But like I said, was it Felix? We are fairly diverse, unlike countries like our neighbor Uganda, which is almost 100% hydro, Zambia, which is significantly hydro. Kenya is 30% hydro, about 35%. Geothermal is significant. So, and geothermal, we are not having any challenges. So what we're basically doing is pushing the other form of generation, and that might include pushing more of the diesel generation, which is a bit expensive, and using the little hydro that we have to meet the requirements for the country. So we have a battery of engineers here. They are helping us to manage that. And hopefully, God willing, and with the weather outlook that we are receiving sometimes in the next 10 days, we expect that we should be able to go through this period. The only challenge is we might get power being slightly expensive because we are ramping the diesel generation more than we ordinarily should be doing. Diesel is normally used for peaking during the peak times between 6 o'clock in the evening and 10, when our homes light up and industries are running. We need maximum power. We're currently having a peak of about 2140, and with some 15% headroom, we are being forced to run the diesel more than would ordinarily run the diesel. And you know, diesel dispatch at more than 20 cents shares, huh? Hydro dispatches at 4 cents. So we are getting power when we run diesels at 5 times the price that hydro would ordinarily generate. But we do hope to be able to sustain the economy and support the systems that need power in this country over the short spell before we get the next rains. It will be, like I said, we are managing the dispatch, and we are managing the hydrology. To a very good extent, we dispatch power on what we call least cost merit least cost merit order of dispatch. The merit order of dispatch says dispatch the cheap one first. And if the economy requires more power, dispatch in that order until you dispatch the most expensive. So ordinarily, we should be dispatching diesel generation only between 6 p.m. in the evening and 10 p.m. when we sleep. Then the industry again is able to be sustained by the low cost power. To the extent that industry must run, we then must support the industry using all the generations that we have. So whereas diesel should be running at an optimum of 5% for peaking, 5% max, we are now at the moment running at about 15%. So there'll be an additional 10% on diesel. And if you do some simulation, to the extent that we are going to be ramping that much more, yes, the power price will go up, but not significantly per se. Diesel currently generates about 600 megawatts. We're basically saying we'll possibly run it up to 20%, maybe max of 25%, to support this hydrology that we have all seen today.
To the power purchase agreements, one, you know that in 2018 we had a moratorium in regard to the PPAs. So and probably that is part of the challenge that we're having in terms of power right now. But at the opportune time is something that we are reviewing. The negotiations are still ongoing in terms of the PPAs. We have not yet got to the conclusive end, but what we anticipate is that, for example, wind and solar, the prices that were effected during the PPAs at around 12 US cents for solar, for wind and solar as well. We expect that once the moratorium is lifted and we get new PPAs on the grid, that price will not be there, and we'll get much lower price to reflect the times of the day. And so therefore, once the negotiations are done and the proclamation is done by none other than the president, then you expect some changes, which we shall not pronounce today. They shall be pronounced at the opportune time when all the negotiations are done. The last 1 month, once when we opened up the lines from Suswa, Isinya to Nairobi South, that is the river and Embakasi, we were able to evacuate much more power from geothermal. And currently we are getting about 44% of our power matrix from geothermal. Sometimes we are able to push up to 48%. And so therefore, that has helped us in terms of managing the thermal dispatches. And so therefore, even with the low hydrology, we are not expecting that your bills will be that affected. So the situation is not that bad. With Ethiopia coming in, 180 megawatts, 200 megawatts, and ramping up of geothermal, the two are helping us in managing the situation as it is. So don't expect that much change in your power bills. We are managing the situation. Yes.
We said earlier that the power purchase agreements we are building today are not for dispatch of power in 2024-25. It is for the period 25, 26, 27. So, but it's important to plan for the future. Even as we do what we do as leaders in this country, I think going forward we've learned some lessons that we should carry along our engineers to advise us appropriately, so that we make decisions. Like you've seen the kind of investments here, they don't just require a policy pronouncement, they require real consensus building and appreciating the knowledge that has been built in this kind of investments. So even as we go forward, today we are dispatching about 13-14% on hydro. So if the worst come to the worst, we're just going to lose 13%, and we think we can pick up that from the other generation matrices. But I don't think we are going to get there. Understanding the science that went into this, how the cascades have been built to support each other, are going downstream.